You already said we call first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm David Sharpe.
Sir, if you'll step right next to me, please. You'll raise your right hand, sir. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. If you have a seat, if you can tell me your first name and last name and spell both.
David Sharpe, D-A-V-I-D, S-H-A-R-P-E.
Thank you, sir. Questions?
State your name, please.
David Sharpe,
And Mr. Sharpe, where are you employed?
State Farm Insurance,
And how long have you been with State Farm?
27 years.
And Mr. Sharpe, you are married to one of the daughters of Jerry Ridge?
Leanne, yes.
And how long have you and Leanne been married?
Be 25 years in March.
You got to think for a minute.
I did.
I don't want to get you in trouble. So you've been involved with the Ridge family for over 25 years?
Correct, yes,
And I
sir.
assume you knew Jerry Ridge?
Very well.
And did Jerry Ridge have other children?
Yes, another daughter, Beth.
And that's Beth?
Yes.
And was he a married man?
Yes, to Brenda.
And how long have they been married for time of his death? A long time?
Long time. 35, 40 years.
And do you know how old he was at the time of his death?
72.
And Mr. Ridge owned a business, is that right?
Yes.
And what was the name of that business?
Valley Palm Brokers,
And where was that located?
Whitwell, Tennessee.
And is that in Marion County?
Yes, it is.
And Mr. Sharpe, how did you learn that something had happened to your father-in-law?
I got a phone call from a family member that there was a fire at the shop, and immediately, I live in Chattanooga. I left Chattanooga immediately coming over to Whitwell, and of course found out after I arrived there that there was a body in the shop, and then later found out through the investigation that it was my father-in-law.
I'm going to show you a photograph, and I'll ask if you can identify that.
That's the sign in front of his business.
You have that marked as Exhibit 1. Your Honor, I'll ask Detective Johnson to please put that up on the screen for jurors to see. And this business was there in Whitwell?
Yes, sir.
And he also had I call it a mail rope, maybe that's not the right way to say that.
He was a contract mail carrier for the United States Postal Service for over 40 years.
And that was actually, he picked up truckloads of mail and carried it to other places.
It was bulk mail pickup all through. He had 5 or 6 stops, Whitwell to Jasper, South Pittsburgh, Guild, Whiteside, and he would deliver that to Shalford Road and then do the same trip in reverse.
Mr. Sharpe, were you familiar with the business?
Yes,
And did your father-in-law have a federal firearms license?
he did.
And did you help in the wrapping up the business, trying to take care of at that point, the mess?
I did, yes.
In your going through the business, did you find much cash inside the building?
Basically none.
And had you been in the business in times past?
Yes,
Are you familiar with your father-in-law's, would he have normally had cash in the business?
yes.
And approximately how much cash would he normally maintain?
He would normally have somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 in a safe there in the shop, just to do business with.
And of course, Mr. Sharpe, as your own personal knowledge, you don't know if that money burned up or something else happened to it.
I do not.
And you provided us with a photograph of Mr. Ridge as that was taken of him in his life.
Yes.
And Your Honor, we'll have to substitute a hard copy and put it on the computer. We can bring it up on the screen and we'll substitute a copy and play it up Exhibit 2.
So we lay copy Exhibit 2.
And this is a photograph of Mr. Ridge that was taken, I assume, in the latter part of his life.
Yes, sir.
And that's how he would have appeared.
Yes, sir.
And Your Honor, we'll get a hard copy Exhibit 2.
Okay, fine. That's Exhibit 2.
They may ask questions for you.
Question. Sir, just a quick question. Did you find a rifle or a gun in wrapping up the business that you turned over to the police?
No, sir.
You didn't find a broken rifle?
No, not that was distinguishable. I didn't find anything like that.
Did you turn something over to the police with wrapping it up?
There was a piece of wood in there that I thought had blood on it after the shop was turned over to me. It was later told to me by the authorities that it was hydraulic oil on that.
But nothing like a gun or a stock or a rifle or anything?
Could have been. It looked like a broken piece of wood to me, just laying on a counter there.
I have no further questions. You hear your right?
I have no further questions.
Thanks, sir. Step down and free stand before the free go.
Okay, who's next? I'll Bill Watson.
Good, good.
Sure.
Good morning. You raise your right hand for me now. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you. If you have a seat. If you tell me your first name and last name, spell bottom.
Dale Watts, DALE WATTS.
Thank you, Ms. Watts. Ms. Watts, I want to ask you first of all, are you retired now, or are you still employed outside the home?
I'm retired.
And what did you retire from? What was your work?
Occupational health nurse.
You were a nurse? Mm-hmm. And how long did you work as a nurse?
30 years.
And you are familiar as a nurse with gloves that health professionals wear?
Yes.
I want to take you back to May the 17th of 2016. And first of all, did you know Jerry Ridge?
Yes.
And you live in the Whitwell area?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you know Mr. Ridge?
Mostly through the pawn shop, but everybody knows everybody in Whitwell, but
Sure.
just
Small
mostly through
town.
the pawn shop.
Okay. And did you go by there on May the 17th? Did they always happen?
Yes.
And Ms. Watts, what was your purpose in going by the pawn shop that day?
To pay a payment for my grandson.
Now, you have a grandson who's also in school,
Yes.
and how old is that grandson? In
Now,
school.
he's 10 now.
So he would have been 8 at the time.
He was 8.
And I assume it's a different grandson that owed Jerry money.
Yes.
Okay. And had you picked up the 8-year-old that afternoon?
I had.
And where is he in school?
Whitwell.
Okay. And about what time would you have picked him up?
Approximately 2:45.
Okay. And after you picked him up, where did you go?
Straight to the pawn shop.
And were you able to park at the pawn shop?
No, I was not. Eventually.
Eventually. So you got parked, and was Miss Kilgore there?
Yes.
And do you know Miss Kilgore?
Yes.
And that's her sitting between her two lawyers.
Yes.
And how did you know? Did you just know Miss Kilgore from the community?
No. When my daughter was younger, they ran around together a little bit.
She was at friends with your daughters, and you knew her.
Yes.
And did you? And was her truck there?
I found out later that it's her truck. Yes.
Okay. Did you have a conversation with her?
Yes.
And was she wearing anything unusual?
Yes.
And what was that?
Purple gloves.
Were they the nitrile gloves? Am I saying that right?
Yes.
And
They appeared to be. They were, because it was what I used in my clinic. They appeared to
okay, they appeared to be gloves like you would have used as a nurse.
be. Yes.
And did that strike you as unusual?
Yes.
Did you ask her about it?
Yes.
And what did Miss Kilgore tell you?
She told me that she had poison oak on her hands. The doctor had given her some medicine and told her to wear the gloves over it.
Had you ever heard of that treatment for poison oak?
No.
Well, yes. I have trouble hearing, so I'm sorry. Will you stand up?
Objection.
And what's the basis for objection?
Relevance, and not just relevance,
What was the last thing too? The last thing?
our expertise.
Okay. Also state, I want you to leave the foundation by the knowledge.
Ms. Watts, had you treated folks with poison oak during your career as a nurse?
Yes,
And how, did you do that yourself, or did you do it at a doctor's direction?
both.
And in your career as a nurse, did you ever put rubber gloves or latex gloves over someone with poison oak?
No.
And why was that?
Keep it moist. You want to dry it out. You want to dry it so it'll heal.
And did you also have occasion to go out and talk to Ms. Kilgore by her truck?
Yes,
And what color truck did she have?
red.
A red truck. And your grandson was with you?
Yes.
The 8-year-old grandson?
The 8-year-old.
And what was he interested in the truck, or did she have a dog, or?
He was interested in the dog in the truck.
Okay. So y'all went out and talked about the dog a little bit.
Yes, we all three went out.
And Ms. Watts, when you left, was she still there?
Yes,
And approximately what time did you leave?
probably around 3:30. I got the subway around 3:35
And that's the subway there in Whitmore?
in Whitwood. That would have took me a couple of minutes to get there.
And did Jerry give you a receipt for the payment you made?
Yes,
And what was that written on?
a Post-it note from Express Strip.
What color was the Post-it note?
White.
Light color Post-it note.
I think it was white.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
Just one moment.
Sure.
Ms. Watts, one other thing. Was anybody with Ms. Kilgore, or was she by herself?
I didn't see anyone else.
And you didn't notice anything other than the gloves, anything unusual about her dealings with Mr. Ridge?
Nothing.
Yes.
Cross-examination.
Responses to a few questions. When you were in this, how long did you know Jerry Rich?
Through the pawn shop, probably 20, 30 years.
Okay. How long have you known Miss Kilgore?
Oh, probably my daughter would have been about 15. She would be 48 if she was still here. So ever how many years that is.
Okay.
A long time.
And you saw Mr. Ridge and Miss Angela interact during the time you were there at the pawn shop.
Yes.
How long were you there at the pawn shop, do you figure?
I was probably there 30 minutes or so.
Okay. And did you ask the question, did you talk to Miss Angela about the gloves in front of Mr. Ridge?
Yes.
During the entire time, did any Mr. Ridge seem fearful or upset or anything like that?
No.
Okay. In other words, normal everyday conversation.
Yes.
And when you went out and your grandson looked at the puppy, right?
Yes.
And anything appear unusual then?
No.
She appear nervous or anything like that?
No.
She show the dog to your grandson and friendly like that?
Yes.
Okay. And the truck, do you remember anything about the truck?
Just that it was red.
Do you remember if it was an extended cab?
No.
Okay. Do you remember how big it was?
I can't be sure. I think it was just a regular, normal size truck. I don't think it was small or large, but I can't be sure.
Okay. Had you ever Mr. Ridge also gave out receipts that basically were a white receipt that said receipt on it, but not just a Post-it note, but things that said
Yes.
receipt on it.
Well, not normally when I paid him. He didn't usually give me a receipt.
Okay.
Usually he had like, can I explain?
Sure.
He had like a box, like where you go in to get in your safety deposit box, and he just would flip through that, and he would write on that.
Okay. But would he give that to you?
No. But normally I would pay him with a check. I didn't usually take cash.
Thank you, ma'am.
Were you ready?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am. You step down, the precinct form, free to go.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Call Todd Brown.
Sir, if you'll step up next to me, please. You raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
If you have a seat, if you can tell me your first name and last name and spell them both.
First name is Roger, R-O-G-E-R, Todd, T-O-D-D, Brown, B-R-O-W-N.
Question?
And Mr. Brown, you go by Todd.
Yes.
And you are the chief at the Whitwell Fire Department.
Yes, ma'am.
And how long have you had that, or been involved with the Whitwell Fire Department?
Almost 30 years.
Okay. And have you had some training and education in regard to your duties as fire chief
Yeah,
there?
I've had some arson detection, and we have an annual fire chief school we go to.
Okay, and you attend that?
Yes.
Is this a volunteer position or a paid position?
Volunteer.
Okay, so you put in a lot of hours, though?
Yes, ma'am.
For your community. And do you have individuals who also participate in the fire crew with you?
Yes.
And on May the 17th of 2016 in the evening, did you happen to be at the fire hall there in Whitwell?
Yes, ma'am.
And where is it located?
It's, the station then was on South Walnut Street at the intersection of Spring Street, about a half a mile from the pawn shop.
Okay, that was my next question. In relation to the Valley Pawn Shop, it was within a short distance
Right.
of what you just told us.
Yeah.
And do you recall getting a dispatch to go to a fire at
Yes, ma'am.
at the Valley Pawn Shop?
Yes, ma'am.
And what time did that come into you?
16:51, which will be 4:51 p.m.
Okay, 4:51 p.m. in
Yes,
the
ma'am.
evening.
Yes.
We're all talking about Central Time.
Right, that's correct.
Okay. And so did you have individuals, part of the department there with you?
Yeah, there was about 4 of us there.
It just happened,
We'd been doing maintenance and just clean up stuff, paperwork. And we're there working on grants and stuff like that
okay.
periodically.
So you were able to suit up and load up quickly and get to Valley Pond?
Yes, ma'am. We were there in 3 minutes.
Okay. And what did you find when you arrived there?
When we arrived, there was gray and brown smoke coming out the eaves. Not a lot of smoke, but it was noticeable. The front door was closed. The steel bar security doors were open.
Let me stop you right there.
Okay.
That's right, Ms. Rhodes.
Sure.
See if you can recognize those 2 photographs.
Yes, that's the entrance,
Okay. Entrance to,
the pawn shop.
okay. Let's talk about this one first.
Okay.
What does that depict?
That is, after the fire had been extinguished, that is the front door.
It's kind of hard to see, a little dark there, but that's the Valley Pond Road.
Yes.
Okay? Now, I'll show you, and Judge, I'd ask that be entered as exhibit, next exhibit. That.
Okay. That is also the entrance to the pawn shop.
Okay, and you were about to describe to the ladies and gentlemen some doors.
Yeah,
We've got it up there.
the steel bar doors that you can see, they were open, they were not secured. The glass doors, which is the main entrance, it was locked. We actually assumed that it was gonna probably flash when we took the glass out, which is not uncommon. Once we took the glass
And
out,
why is that, when a building's closed up and there's a fire inside?
when it builds up heat, usually when you feed it oxygen like that, it immediately takes off. You got to have heat, fuel, and oxygen for a fire to burn. The lack of one or the other will stop it from, taking off. And once you, ventilate it like that, it usually feeds the oxygen to it and it will flash out on you. This did not happen that way. When we took the glass out, there was a lot of smoke, there was a lot of heat, but there was no visible flame.
Okay, but as you went on in, there was flame and fire in the building?
There was, flame was contained to just the corner area behind the counter, right around in the safe area, what I would call the office area where the desk and all that was where it was contained to.
Okay, and was that the area where you later learned the body of Jerry Ridge?
Yes.
And did you all notice there was a body there after you were able to clear out the smoke? And
Well, yeah, when they initially put the fire out, they did not know. They came out. At that time, we were able to get the back door open. We went ahead and took the rest of the glass out of the front windows, ventilated the smoke. When my guys went back in, they found the body. They came out and got me. I went in and verified that there was a victim. And at that point, I had everybody clear out.
And Judge, I'd offer that photograph be exhibit number 4. And Chief Brown, once you realized this was beyond what you would, I guess there's no normal fire scene, but once you realized that there was a deceased person there, did you secure the area?
Yes, nobody was allowed in or out without my knowledge. The only time anybody made entry back into it was, I did have one of my firemen, well actually two of them. One was there as a safety officer, and there was a door from the counter, the main counter to the left. There was a door to a room that hadn't been checked, and he wanted to go back in and just check it for fire. He went in there. At that point, he came back out, and nobody re-entered until myself, Lieutenant Paul West with the police department, and medical examiner Dr. Adcock. We made entry and we escorted him in. Once medical examiner and Lieutenant West and myself came out, nobody re-entered until the sheriff's department arrived on scene.
Okay. And you all, of course, stayed there outside and...
Yes, we had a person at the back door and one at the front door to make sure that nobody entered the building.
Okay. And was there a good deal of smoke in the building?
Quite a bit. It was very hard to see. As a matter of fact, when they made an initial entry, they had to back out to give us a chance to get the back door open and try to get, at least to where it was somewhat visible so they could move around.
And were you able to confirm, once the fire was put out, the source or the location where the fire originated?
Yes.
And where was that?
That was in the back corner in front of the safe area, where the safe was located behind the counter. It would be on the north side of the building.
And that was also the area where the body was?
Yes.
And the Valley Pawn Shop is located in what county?
It's in Marion County.
Just 1 minute. You've described that you were dispatched at 4:51.
Yes, ma'am.
And you got there at 3 minutes later, so that would have been at 4:54
Right.
PM. And do you recall at what time you made the call about there being a fatality in there approximately?
If I can look at my notes. Okay, I made the call to dispatch at 17:35.
So that would have been 5:35
That's correct.
for us normal folks who go by that time.
Sorry.
And shortly thereafter, I guess, additional law enforcement began arriving with the sheriff's department.
Yes.
And following that, some additional investigators came.
Right.
Do you recall Matt Blansett getting there?
Yes.
Detective with the sheriff's department?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you, Chief Brown. Let me have some questions for you.
Cross-examination.
Hello, Chief. Was Chief Rodney Easterly at the scene?
Yes, he was.
What time did he get there?
It was a short time after I had contacted him. He wasn't actually on duty. According to my record, 17:45.
Okay, 5:45.
5:45, yes.
Okay. And when they went, first of all, you're also currently working for dispatch at the Marion County Sheriff's Department,
Yes, sir.
correct? And that's a full-time position?
Yes.
Okay. And was there, I'll withdraw that question. How many people were in and out of the pawn shop when the fire happened?
When we
They
first,
released the scene to,
after I released the scene,
well, what time did you release the scene?
I released the scene when Detective Blansett arrived. Everything was turned over to them. That was at, I turned it over to Detective Matt Blansett in the Sheriff's Department when he arrived.
Was Rodney Easterly was there, correct?
Excuse me?
Rodney Easterly was there?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and he was there before it was turned over to the Sheriff's Department?
That's correct.
I have no further questions.
Can you read the rest?
No, Your Honor.
Make sure you get down if you're standing over here to go.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Call Matt Blansett.
Sir, if you'll step up here next to me, please. You'll raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes, sir. Thank you. You can tell me both your first name and last name, spell and color.
Matt Blansett, Matt-Blansett.
Thank you. Questions?
I guess goes without saying, but you're a detective with the Marion County Sheriff's Department.
Yes,
And how long have you worked in law enforcement, Detective Blansett?
since 2002.
And do you recall being called out to the scene of multiple crimes at the Valley Pawn Shop on May the 17th of 2016?
Yes.
And when you arrived there, what did you just initially observe about the scene?
Just a commercial fire had taken place at this address. There was a lot of folks around, a lot of fire department people, law enforcement.
And had you been called out because of the finding of a deceased person there, turned out later to be Jerry Ridge within the pawn shop?
Yes.
And were you able to observe the interior there where the body was located?
Yes.
Or if I could approach, and I've already shown these to Mr. Lipton. Do you recognize that?
I do.
And what does that appear to depict?
Deceased subject there at the fire scene.
Give him just a second to get it pulled up there.
Before it's introduced, I'd like to offer the evidence. I'm going to object this out of evidence.
Your Honor, I move this be entered as the next exhibit.
All right, thank you. 5 on it.
And for the record, we're talking about exhibit number 5 that's been placed on the wall there. And I'll give you a pointer. Technical challenge. If you would, it's difficult to see, and of course, we're familiar with the pictures, but the ladies and gentlemen here are not. If you would, show them the area where the body is in that photograph.
I'll circle the area right here.
Okay. And there appears to be a good deal of fire damage there in and around the body.
Yes, there is.
And just on your visual observation, was the worst or the bulk of the fire damage contained within that area?
It was.
And Detective Blansett, when you made your way into this scene, would you describe it as a sparse area, or was there a lot of stuff in there?
There was a lot of stuff inside the store. It was pretty cluttered up.
Okay. And were you able to make any observations about what later turned out to be a receipt book there in the area of the pawn shop?
Yes, ma'am.
Where was it located?
On a counter. I can't explain it from this picture, but it was sitting on top of a display counter, display case.
Okay. Your Honor, if I could approach. Nice, that item?
Yes, ma'am, that's it.
Okay. What is that? The receipt?
That is a receipt book that's sitting on top of the counter.
Your Honor, that's that be marked as exhibit number 6 and entered.
Number 6.
And I'll go ahead, while he's getting that one called up, show you another photograph. This appears to be a zoomed-in area
Yes, it is.
of the,
Receipt book with what appears to be blood on it.
Your Honor, I'd ask that be entered as exhibit number 7.
Number 7.
You've already testified, but what about this receipt book certainly got your attention?
The last receipt that appeared in the book was made out to Miss Kilgore, and in the amount of $4,000, and that was the last
Did it have her
receipt.
first name on there?
It did. It stated Angela Kilgore.
Okay. And was this significant to you?
I felt that it was, just in the manner how the book was laying there with what appeared to be blood all over it, and that was the last receipt written in a large amount of money.
And it was dated what? May the 17th?
I'll have to look at
That date?
Yes, ma'am. It was
Okay.
dated the day of the fire.
Okay. And did you, in looking around, also eventually identify what is commonly referred to as an FFL book?
I did.
And for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what is that?
It's your firearms log. When you're in the business and you have a FFL license, you have to keep a book with ATF logging in every firearm you have in the store. And if it leaves the store, you have to log it out as well.
And Mr. Ridge had that type license and
He had a
maintained
FFL, and that
those
was
books.
a federal firearms license, and he did have a federal firearms license book in the store.
Okay. Your Honor, if I could approach.
Sure.
Yes, that's his firearms record log.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd ask this be marked exhibit number 7, 8, sorry. Entered into evidence. And an additional photograph.
Yes, ma'am, that's a zoomed-in picture of the book with what appears to be some type of blood on the front of it.
Okay. All right, I'd ask that be marked exhibit number 9 and entered.
That's number 9.
And Detective Blansett, did you take custody of this federal firearms book?
I did.
And did you place it into an evidence bag?
I did.
And did you eventually turn that over to Agent Mark Wilson with the TBI?
Yes, I did.
And this exhibit up on the screen is exhibit number 8. And is this the front cover of that book that we're looking at?
Yes.
And the next exhibit, number 9, shows a closer image of what you've described as, to the naked eye, appeared to be blood.
Yes.
And what made you think it was blood? Goes without saying, but just for the record.
Just an experience. I've dealt with blood and crime scenes. It just appeared to, it's what it appeared to be.
Okay. And inside that book, we'll enter it into evidence, but what's located beyond the cover inside the book?
That will be the log sheets of all the firearms that Mr. Ridge had in the store or that he had previously sold.
Okay. And once they're entered into the business, they're entered on the log, and then ideally, once
If they
they're
leave, they're
sold-
supposed to be showed that they're taking off.
Okay. And once you made the observations about that receipt book and the blood and who the last receipt was to, did you also have some information about a particular vehicle that had been there?
Yes, we had received information that there was a red pickup truck at the store shortly before the fire had taken place. After I received the receipt book or noticed it with her name on it, I contacted Detective Johnson and asked him to see if she had a vehicle fitting that description.
So you conveyed this information there from the scene to Detective Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
And as far as you know, he began working on that information you provided?
Yes.
And there in the pawn shop, we've shown the jury some photographs depicting what appears to be blood. Were there other areas of blood there near this receipt book?
The receipt book really drew my attention to it because it had a lot of what appeared to be blood on the front of it. And just around in that area, there was blood.
Okay. All right. Mr. Lipton may have some questions. Oh, sorry. I could approach, Judge.
Sure.
Show you what's marked, at least on the outside, item number 7, the description on the bag.
Yes, that's the log book inside of the brown paper bag, evidence bag.
Okay, and is this the bag that you placed this item in?
Yes.
And did you turn over to?
Agent Wilson with TBI.
Okay. You all right to ask that to enter as the next exhibit? You may ask.
Cross-examination.
Detective, you're currently with the Marion County Sheriff's Department, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're also with the ATF Task Force.
I was at that time. I'm no longer with them.
Okay. ATF Task Force, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms is really what it stands for, correct?
Yes, sir.
ATF. And you were at that time.
Yes.
And you investigated in part on behalf of the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms as a member of that task force, correct?
My investigation at that time was for the Marion County Sheriff's Department.
Okay. Well, you're a member of the task force at that time, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're a member, and you're interested in firearms, obviously, not only as a member of law enforcement, as a part of the Marion County Sheriff's Department, but as part of the federal government and ATF task force, correct?
Are you asking if I'm interested in firearms?
Well, crimes involving firearms.
Yes.
Okay. And an FFL book is a federal firearms book.
Yes.
Okay. And did you go through the pages in those books yourself?
I did not.
Okay. So you didn't know whose names were in there and whose names were not?
No, sir, I didn't.
Okay. Did you look at the serial numbers and match the ones in the book to the ones that were taken from Miss Kilgore in Kilgore truck at any time?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay. Do you know if the name Felicia Tetherow or Felicia Tate was in that book?
I did not look inside the book.
Okay. Are you aware of any rifles or guns found in a van?
There was some weapons found outside in a van in the parking lot. I can't tell you exactly how many or what, but I do recall there were some weapons outside in a van, yes, sir.
Can you describe in any more detail about that?
I cannot.
Okay. It was basically a church van, correct?
I just remember it being a van. I can't tell you if it was church van or...
Do you know where those weapons were, of who they were registered to or anything about them?
I do not.
Did you take them into evidence?
I did not.
Did anybody, as far as you know, take them into evidence?
I cannot answer that.
Do you know if any other guns were missing from the pawn shop?
I do not.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the FFL book takes care of handguns, is that correct?
Takes care of all firearms, yes.
All, including rifles?
Yes.
Okay. Were there lots of rifles in the pawn shop?
There were some firearms still on the shelves in the pawn shop. Had a lot of smoke damage, so I can't tell you exactly if they were rifles or shotguns or what they were, but there was probably a mixture.
Okay. And you don't know if they were in the federal firearms license book or not?
I do not know if they were logged in or not. No, sir, I don't.
Okay. Do you know who would know?
No, I don't.
Okay. Was that audit was done, correct, by ATF?
Yes.
And you were a member of the task force, correct?
At that time, yes.
1 second. No further questions.
Can you read that? All right, thanks for sitting down. Please go ahead and please stand forward. Linda, we'll go ahead and take our morning break this morning. You need to leave your legal pads and pens just sitting in your chair there. We remind the instructions to you not to discuss the case with anyone when we discuss the case in your presence. And Deputy, yesterday when I was there, it was kind of hot. So just make sure the air conditioning is working in that jury room so it's comfortable for them. And we'll start back here at 10 o'clock. All right? So, everybody rise, please. All right. We'll stand at recess till 10 o'clock.